Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. We're going to go ahead and get started while we have some folks coming in. We are honored to have our VP of Solutions Engineering, Rich Severson, here with us today. We will be going over connections and extensions in NoTouch Center, as well as some customization options in NoTouch Center. A few quick items. We are recording today's presentation. We will make sure that you have that recording available to you after the webinar. Feel free to share with other teammates. We'll make it available on YouTube. Please enter your questions in the Q&A and chat. We will do our best to answer as many as we can. We have time set aside at the end for Q&A. And if you have a question that's specific to you and your organization, we'll probably reach out to you, individually afterwards. Or you can reach out to our support team. That works as well. And I think we're ready to go, Rich. Anything else you want to say?
No, I think we're good to go. I'm assuming you can
Okay.
hear me. Everything's good.
Yeah, everything's good.
All right, and everybody can see my screen, correct?
Yes.
All right, well, good. All right, so welcome. I guess this is the third version or third instance of doing this. So with that, what I'm going to do, and hopefully we got 30 minutes to cover today, and hopefully I've got enough material to cover 30 minutes, and I think with the questions and stuff, we'll be able to do that. But one of the things that I wanted to do is in one of the previous versions, I think it was actually in version 1 or version 2 of this. So we talked about connections and how to customize the experience for the users a little bit. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to go a little bit deeper into that today, show you some of the things that are available that a lot of people are unaware of that you can do with NoTouch Center, and creating connections and customizing the connections and those kinds of things. And then go a little bit further into that with we're talking about extensions, how to utilize custom extensions from Citrix. Maybe we were working with Citrix to solve a problem, and they've given you a custom version of Workspace app. How to use that. So we're going to talk about some of those kinds of things, and we'll walk through some of that stuff. So hopefully that helps and gives you a little bit idea of what we're going to go through. So with that, the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and we're going to talk about the extensions and utilizing a custom version of Workspace app from Citrix, how to use that, how to apply it, and those kinds of things. Because what we find is sometimes, a customer may have a problem with their Citrix environment, so they may be working directly with the Citrix team, and the Citrix team may provide a early release or a test version of Workspace app that they want you to be able to test and to be able to apply that to our devices. Obviously, with NoTouch OS, you can't just go add additional versions of the Workspace app. So we've actually enabled or provided a way to be able to do that via NoTouch Center. So basically what would happen is you would receive from Citrix, you would receive a custom version of the Workspace app, and it's typically delivered much like this in a tar file that you can actually then just go ahead and drag and drop and add it to the miscellaneous directory within NoTouch Center. And what that does is that makes it available to the NoTouch Center file store. Then when you do that, you can go to either the group settings or you can go to the individual device settings. And in this case, I've set it at an individual device level. And you can go to extensions and then you can select that URL as part of the extensions that you've made available to the device. So then when you announce that setting change and reboot that device then would retrieve or download that tar file to the device so that you can actually then test it. Now, once it's loaded, and again, you'd have to announce and reboot and allow the device to download and retrieve and install that custom version of the application. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to verify that and how to look at that in just a few moments. But then once you've done that, then what you also have to do is you have to actually go to your Citrix connection that you've created. So if you go to your Citrix connection, and you see here, this is where I've got the Citrix connection. And then I'm going to go ahead and choose Workspace app. And then as I believe everybody on the call knows, because NoTouch Center is a browser-based utility, we can do a Control F, and we can search for version. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump down because I know where it is. It's actually right down here. The next one, and then I can select client version. And with that client version, as long as I've loaded the custom version that Citrix has provided to me, you see I now have an option to choose custom. Okay. Now, what custom means is that means it's going to load the version that you selected. So this may be a 23, or in this case, it may be a 2405, something that Citrix has provided to you for testing. Okay. And if you had not done that, then you wouldn't see the custom option being available as something to be able to go ahead and load. Okay. So hopefully that helps on how to load a custom version of Workspace app that may be provided to you from Citrix, okay? Now, one of the things that I didn't mention as part of that, but we'll go back to this, and this is just in general. When you're trying to load extensions from NoTouch Center to the devices, if you have not enabled a certificate relationship, you always have to go to Security, and then go to check certificate on system downloads and go ahead and turn that off. Okay. So just be mindful that if you're adding external extensions, you may have to go ahead and do that if you haven't enabled certificate relationship between NoTouch Center and the devices. Okay. So hopefully that helps with that information. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is we're going to talk a little bit about, and actually I did this, is I've created an extension and I've uploaded it. We'll go back. Let's go to resources and let's go to miscellaneous. And you're going to see that I actually enabled the ability to download and install or sideload Microsoft Edge to my devices. And because I've done that, again, I have the ability to see that via the extensions or go set that via extensions. So again, we'll go into the extensions for group level settings, go to extensions, and then I can scroll down to Microsoft Edge. And you'll see that I've chosen it from the drop-down because it's available in the file store, and I can go ahead and load that, okay? So again, you have this check security settings, you announce, reboot, the device will go ahead and load Edge. But what I did is I did some customizations with the Edge connections. This is one of the things that I wanted to point out today. So again, outside of the fact that, I've gone in and I've chosen a connection mode to be Microsoft Edge, and again, as everybody's aware of, these are all the different connection types that we can choose. But again, because we're using Edge, we select Microsoft Edge. And then I wanted to point out here, oftentimes people say we want to have multiple tabs launched. So in this case, what I've done is I've chosen Stratodesk.com, and then it's a comma separated delimiter from the second tab that I want it to load. And you could have multiple tabs, so you could have another comma and another website. But what this tells Edge is that I want to load two tabs to two different websites concurrently, okay? Now, one of the things that I've also done today, and this is part of what I wanted to talk about with today's tips and tricks, is I've gone to the connection and I've gone to extended, and I've gone in and I've added some additional values or features to the way that this is going to start, okay? So what I've done is to the Edge connection at the group level, I've said I want to add a start banner that is an acceptable use or use policy for this machine. Oftentimes, people will be using a browser in a kiosk mode, or they may be using it in a certain environment where they have an acceptable use policy, or they want the users to acknowledge something. So you can put in the text that you want to be there, and you can see in this case, I've said use of this system, blah, blah, blah. And then I can say this banner, the name of the dialog box is going to be the acceptable use policy. I can specify the geometry size of the window. So in this case, I've set it to be 400 by 100, etc. And then I put an OK button and I put a deny button, okay? So in just a moment, you're going to see what this does. But basically what happens now when somebody launches the Edge connection, they're going to be greeted with a dialog box based on this geometry and these parameters that says, hey, this is an acceptable use policy. If you want to use this, and this is the size of the window, in order to actually launch Edge, you have to click OK. But if you click deny, then Edge will actually not launch. So this gives you the ability to have an acceptable use policy. And you may want to have other different messaging. You may want to put, hey, make sure you remember to reboot your connection or those kinds of things. Depends on what the message is or how the use case is or what it fits your environment. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you, and I'm going to go ahead and launch the Edge connection on this machine. And you're going to see, okay, so now here's the acceptable use policy, the dialog that I put in right here. Obviously, the size of the window. And then I've got the OK and the deny. And as example, if I go ahead and click deny now, Edge will not launch. So I've just denied and said to Edge, don't launch. So now what we're going to do is we're going to head and go back in and I'm going to relaunch and I'm going to get the acceptable use policy again. And this time I'm going to say OK. And now what it'll do is it'll go ahead and it will launch Edge. And you notice it's going to launch Edge and it's going to launch Edge with the 2 different tabs that I specified as part of the startup for the connection. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody, and that's good information. Hopefully something that you've learned something new today with that. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is we're going to talk a little bit about how to reorganize the icons. We've talked about this before, but I want to go ahead and point it out again just because it's one of those things. So by default, when you create connections, the connections will appear on the desktop for the users in the order that you've created them. But you may want to rearrange them for whatever reason. I may want the users to see Edge in the top left. So if I wanted to do that, then what I can do is I can go back and I can go to Edge. And I believe it's under connection. Let's go find icon sort value. Actually, before we do that, let's go here. So icon connection mode, right? So this is where we can actually set things to be the favicons so that the icons will actually appear to be what the icon for the website is, meaning if you were like using CNN by chance, you could actually have it so the icon would appear as CNN rather than just a generic icon. I believe the icon sort mode may be under extended. Let me go look here. Extended. There's the start banner. Oh, let me go ahead and we'll go ahead and select all just because I don't remember where the icon start menu is or icon sort order. And I may have to go to the group level to do that. Let's see. There we go. Icon sort key. Okay. So by default, the icon sort key value for all connections is 100, meaning that they're all equal value. So in this case, if I want Edge to appear above Citrix and above US Demo, all I've got to do is lower that value so that it's lower than 100. So in this case, we'll just go through and I'm just going to go ahead and set it to 80. And then I can go ahead and do actions, announce. And then once I've announced that, and then when those devices announce, you will see that the icon actually will then go ahead and move. So the icon order will actually change as we're doing this. So we'll come back to that in a couple minutes, but you'll see that the icon value or the icon is actually going to change its location. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about, again, we've talked about extensions and loading the extensions and side loading those applications. And just as a refresher, let's go back up and let's go to resources. And let's go to miscellaneous. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, that's not where I want to go. I want to go to group settings. And I want to go to extensions. And we're going to look here. And you see here, these are all the different extensions that we've built templates around. So meaning if I enable them, NoTouch OS knows how to automatically install and enable those applications and have them ready for the device. Okay. So, and IBM 5250, one of the latest ones that we've done is Island browser, because there's a lot of people that are now starting to use that. Landsweeper, again, the Citrix custom ones. If you want to do different Firefox URL TeamViewer, if you actually want to use Chrome versus Chromium, you can do that. Avaya, CrowdStroke, Zoom. Note that there's a difference between the Zoom VDI plugins and the actual Zoom client itself. Same with Cisco. So there's a lot of different extensions that are available. Nice DCV is actually a newer protocol that Amazon is using to replace Workspaces streaming protocol. So again, these are all the different extensions that we have templates built for. So you can go ahead and load those extensions up to resources, and then they would be available as part of that. Now, so what I wanted to do is I wanted to go ahead and talk about that. We want to talk about, when people are using extensions, How do I validate that the extension is actually loaded properly? Is it loading every time the device reboots? What's the behavior? Those kinds of things. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take a look at that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to web access into this device. And once I open the web access panel into the device, again, because I'm the administrator, I know what the password is. So I can then look at all the information about that device just as if I was sitting at the keyboard and mouse of that device. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to go to debug information. And for those of you that have not had the opportunity to do this yet, again, this is where you get a lot of information about the device, including, you have the ability to collect the support file out of the device, which again runs a bunch of commands, pull all of the diagnostic information about that device into a single file, and then that file actually gets loaded or retrieved back to my local browser. I also have the ability to click on USB, and I can see any USB devices that may be plugged in. So if you were helping somebody diagnose whether or not their camera was working, if I had a camera plugged into the device, you would see a camera connected here. But again, the purpose of this discussion is what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the cache. And the cache, again, is those extensions that are downloaded and retrieved or sideloaded to the device on the fly. Now, so the question is if I'm sideloading an application, let's say Chrome, or in this case, Edge, is it downloading and retrieving that application every time the device boots? And the answer to that is no. Okay. And the reason for that, as you might imagine, if you had tens of thousands of devices where you're sideloading an application, if every time that those devices rebooted, they downloaded that application, number one, you could end up with quote unquote almost like a boot storm where you've got a bunch of devices downloading or pulling an application at one time. And two, you would then be using your download source, whether it be a public source, whether it be your NoTouch Center, you're going to be using that a lot, and there's a lot of data flow there. So, example, if you're using a AWS public URL for that, then obviously you'd be retrieving a lot of data and probably incurring a lot of expense. So, and by the way, as I mentioned regarding those resources and extensions, those extensions can be any URL as long as that URL is accessible to the devices. Okay. So in this case, you see here, okay, so we're looking at the debug cache or the cache for this device that I've been working with. And I want to point out, obviously today's date and the time that the device was rebooted, and e-tag. So let's talk about e-tags for a moment. So, and by the way, I'm not an expert at all this, but I'm going to give you some of the information that I know that will help you when you're diagnosing or looking at this information. So effectively, what an e-tag is when a device reaches to a web server for content, whether that content be an icon, whether it be a file, whatever the wget request is, what it's going to do is it's going to look to that source, and some sources, whether it be NoTouch Center, whether it be a AWS bucket, whatever the web source is that it's getting that, may or may not support e-tags, but in this case, the e-tags is supported. And so I can see that this device has received an e-tag for this resource, right? And notice in this case, the resource happens to be an icon. And in this case, it's actually pulling an icon, a favicon icon for my Citrix connection from the Stratodesk website. So it's going to actually use the Stratodesk icon for my Citrix connection. Now, the things to note here, right, is, again, looking at the e-tag, if I were to go to another machine that has that same configuration, I should see that the e-tag is identical, meaning if I've got two machines using the same source and accessing the same resource, if that source has not changed or been modified, the e-tag across those multiple machines would be the same. Okay. Hopefully that helps a little bit about e-tags and what those do and what those machines mean. And I just noticed we have two messages here. I apologize. Let me go look. Is there a banner option to use not on connection, but at power on the device like? Let's come back to that because actually there is a way to do that, but we'll come back to that. And then when I try to set up an Edge browser app icon, it says, oh, okay. So the question there is when you set up Edge on their machine and they double click, it says that the software package may not be installed and it's not launching. That means one of two things. Either you need to be a little bit more patient and allow for the application to actually download and install. Actually, it could be three things. Another one is you may have applied that policy or that setting and not have rebooted the device to allow the device to retrieve the application, or the source file that it's trying to retrieve from is not available. Okay, so what I tell people in diagnosing that, so in that case, if you're trying to sideload Edge, what you can do is use a Chrome connection and enter that URL and see if the device is actually able to reach that URL and pull down that extension. Okay, hopefully that helps. Okay, so now let's jump back into the cache information again, right? So what we're looking at is that, again, this was today's date. This looked and found an E tag. Last skip, okay? What last skip means is that means that the device reached out to check to see if that resource was available. It is available, but it's already here, and the resource is a match, so therefore we're just going to go ahead and skip. Okay, that means in this case, it did not re-download that source. Okay, so that's actually a good thing. That means that I've configured the device to download something. In this case, it happens to be an icon. The icon is there, it's available, and because it's a match to what I've already got, I'm not going to download it again. I'm just going to skip it and continue and move forward. Okay, so let's go down through and let's go a little bit further. This is where we just downloaded, or I downloaded a little bit earlier, the custom workspace app version. Okay. And again, you're going to see the same skip, etc. But notice in this case, there is no E tag here, right? Because the source in this case, it didn't support using E tags. But then I can see the progress of that application being downloaded to the device. So to the person that asked that question about the software was not available, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to look at your cache on your device and see if this was progressed, see if this has occurred for Edge. If it hasn't, that's going to tell you that either A, the URL is not reachable, or B, that you probably you may not have rebooted the device for the device to go ahead and be able to retrieve it. In fact, if I continue scrolling down through here, you're going to see where I did the same thing with Edge. This one's actually a long one, so we're going to go ahead and grab that. We'll skip down through and we'll get to the Edge piece. And there we go. Hopefully this should be Edge right here. And there you go. So in this case, you see, right, on today's date, and by the way, last modified, right, in the cache information, last modified is Tuesday, 2 April 2024. That's the last time that file was modified from the file store. So as an example, if I uploaded a newer version today, and I rebooted the machine and it did the announcements and everything I expected, but this was still saying April 2nd, that means I'm still using the old version, which if you're looking for a new feature may explain why you're not seeing the new feature. So those are the kinds of things to be mindful of when you're looking at the client cache. And again, you see here, I can scroll through and you can see that, again, it progressed and I was able to load the entire version of Edge. Okay. So that's pretty much everything that I wanted to go through today. The other thing that I wanted to talk about regarding client cache real quick, I often get asked questions about spider mode. And spider mode is a feature of wget, and some web servers support spider mode, some don't support spider mode, but it effectively is kind of the same thing as E tag, meaning what's going to happen is, and actually I shouldn't say it that way. Let me restate. So spider mode basically tells the client to check to see if the resource is available. It's not going to go get it. It's just going to say, is that resource there? And it is, just validate, okay, I know that the resource is there, don't download. Okay. And there's different reasons and different use cases why spider mode might be enabled or might be in use. Is there a way to clear the cache on the device so that force the devices to download? There is no way to directly clear the cache. Of course, you could do it via command line. So that's one way that you could do it. You can also just remove the extension and reboot the device. So that's another way that you could do it. Or you could update or just remove the resource and then re-upload the resource so that the date time information on that resource changes, and then re-add the connection and re-add the resource and reboot and have it download again. So there are multiple ways to do that, in a little bit of a roundabout, if you will, but there is no direct, hey, right click, clear cache. Okay. So hopefully that answers that question. And we've got another new question. Oh, nope, that's a response. So yes, thank you. Okay. And again, probably, depending on what you're doing, you may actually, so here, we're going to jump through this real quick. And I don't know the command off the top of my head. But what you could do, right, is example, let me go ahead and close this out. Let's say that you're troubleshooting this kind of exact scenario where you're trying to clear cache. What I could do is I could go to the device. And again, this is the device we're working on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say create new connection. And I'm going to say clear cache. And so now I've got the new connection option there, and I'm going to go and I'm going to say create custom command. And then I could go down here to command. And again, I don't know what the command is off the top of my head, but it would probably be something similar to, rm slash, we'll say temp / cache. I don't know what it is. So I'm not actually going to execute or use this, but I think you get the idea, right? And now that I've got that command there, and I've said that I want to do a custom command, I can then go ahead and say actions, announce, and we should get an icon on the desktop. So now as I'm playing around and working with this, if I said, okay, it didn't work or it did work, I could just double click on that new icon and it would execute that command and clear the cache. Okay. Again, don't take this as verbatim. I don't believe that that's accurate, but I'm just using this as an example how that might work. And you see there, I immediately get the desktop icon. And likewise, and this was one that I love to show. Let me go ahead and clear that one out. Let me delete that. This is one of those ones that I love to use as an example. And for those of you that haven't seen this before, what I'm going to do is I've got a static profile. Okay, and a static profile, think about it, is something that you may want to use over and over again, but you don't want necessarily assigned to specific devices or groups of devices. So what I've done is I've got one called a debugging console. So in this case, I just created a new static profile. I've created a static profile with a connection. I've named that connection to be SSH console. And again, it's a custom command, much like the clear cache was, but this is the command that I'm going to execute. So now I'm going to go back to this device. And by the way, I've given that an icon, the whole thing, right? So now I'm going to go back to this device. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select static profile. And part of that static profile, I'm going to say add the debugging console to the desktop. Say add. And now I'm going to go actions, announce. And because I removed the clear cache one and added the static profile for the debugging console, when that device announces, it's going to reflash. And ideally, if the demo gods work the way they're supposed to, icons are going to update and poof, things should appear correctly. So, but that's how you can do things on the fly and give you different parameters and settings and, be able to do those custom things that you may want to do. And there, the announce just occurred. You see there's the SSH console, the clear cache one disappeared. And I can go ahead and I can click on the SSH console and have it execute. And you'll see that I get the, I get the equivalent of a putty session directly on the device. So there you go. So there's I guess round three of tips and tricks for Stratodesk. And so with that, Danielle, if there's no other questions, I'll turn it back over to
Yeah. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, everyone else, for joining us today. We will send the recording out in a follow-up email, and we also have a post-webinar survey. So if you have other questions specific to you, feel free to put your questions there. I can't remember if it's anonymous or not, but definitely put your email in there in case it is anonymous. But if you don't mind, we are also very interested in maybe what trade shows you either are attending this year, have attended, or would like to attend. That would be very helpful for our marketing team. We'd like to learn more about, the events that you like to go to. So if you have a chance, please put that into our comments section after on that survey. So appreciate everyone who's here today, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.